My parents think my wife would be perfect for my parasitic brother at their anniversary party, but my wife asked if the neighbor was also perfect for my mother. This weekend, my parents have invited my wife and me to a special dinner with other family members to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary. Anyone would go to their parents' anniversary because it's a family gathering, but honestly, I have mixed feelings about going. The main reason I feel so hesitant has to do with the clan. You see, the clan is my younger brother, with whom I've never been very close. Even though we're only 2 years apart, we don't have a strong bond. A lot of this has to do with how he feels about me. He holds a lot of resentment, and it's been like that since we were kids. When we were little, our parents were really strict, especially our dad. He spent years in the military, and that mindset definitely showed in how he raised us. He was always pushing us to compete against each other. It didn't matter what it was, running to catch the school bus in the morning or trying to outdo each other with chores. Everything felt like a competition between the two of us. It wasn't just about doing your best, it was about doing better than your brother. At first, I think the competition between the clan and me wasn't so bad. It might have even been healthy in the beginning. We were just kids, and a little rivalry can be normal, but over time, things started to change. My brother began to fall behind, especially in school. I was always good with my studies. I got good grades, got high scores on tests, and brought home report cards my parents could be proud of. Unfortunately, that only made things harder for Declan. Since I was doing well, my dad constantly compared him to me, and when Declan didn't measure up, he got harsh punishments. There were nights when they wouldn't let him have dinner, and other times they would force him to stand in a corner for hours until his legs gave out. I could tell how much it hurt him, not just physically, but emotionally too. Dad kept using me as an example. "Look at your brother," he'd say. "Why can't you be more like him?" He even forced me to tutor Declan, thinking that if I helped him study, his grades would improve. I didn't mind helping. I wanted to, but it was hard to help him when he felt so much pressure from our father. The truth was, Declan didn't enjoy studying. It wasn't his thing. He was more of a playful and active kid who liked to be outdoors, running around, and using his imagination. Sitting still with a book simply didn't interest him, no matter how much they tried to make it happen. Over the years, it became increasingly clear that the constant comparisons and pressure had taken a toll on Declan. He started to resent me, and honestly, I can understand why. He felt like he was always a step behind, always coming up short, no matter how hard he tried. But I didn't enjoy being the focus of my father's attention. I hated it too. I mean, not only did I feel bad for Declan, but I also lived with my own pressure of not being good enough for my father at some point, of failing a test or not living up to his expectations. I was vocal with my father about Declan and what I saw, but that only served to earn me a punishment too. Then, right before I left for college, something happened that shook our whole family. Declan did something drastic. He took a whole bottle of sleeping pills. Luckily, our parents found him in time and rushed him to the hospital. The doctors were able to save him, but that moment changed everything. It was as if someone had removed the blindfold from my parents, especially my dad. For the first time, they realized how much pain Declan had been hiding, how deeply he had been suffering all those years. It took something that serious, something that could have ended in tragedy, for them to finally see the damage that had been building up inside him for so long. After the overdose, things really changed at home. My parents started attending therapy sessions with Declan to help them understand what was happening. Since then, they've treated him like he was made of glass, as if any wrong word or a little pressure could make him break. Over the years, I've apologized to my brother more than once. I've told him how sorry I am for not having been more aware, for not sticking up for him more when we were younger. I've tried to make things right, at least between the two of us. But even now, so many years later, I still feel like my parents continue treating him like a child. They're overcompensating for all the harm they did to him, and I don't think that's good either. After high school, when my dad wanted Declan to go to college, my brother threatened to commit suicide again, saying he couldn't live away from home and didn't really need higher education. So he never went, without a degree, not even good grades from high school. Declan has struggled to get a steady, good-paying job. Even when he does get employed, he has trouble keeping it. Whether it's because he misses too much work or ends up clashing with his coworkers, he eventually gets fired. It's like a pattern that keeps repeating. My brother still lives at home, doesn't pay rent, and depends on our parents for everything. Food, bills, daily expenses, you name it. To be clear, my brother doesn't have any diagnosed mental illness right now. He goes to therapy now and then, and aside from the depression he had back then, he's doing okay now. He's functional. He's not struggling like he was before. In fact, he has a group of friends he hangs out with. They mostly party. It's not exactly a healthy crowd, but at least he's not a loner. The only thing is, he does it all with our parents' money. And I think that's what frustrates me the most. My parents never push him, never challenge him, never ask him to take responsibility. They're afraid, and I get it. They're afraid of pushing him too hard, of him doing something drastic again, and he knows it. He knows exactly how to take advantage of that fear. Sometimes it really seems like he uses it to his advantage, so when they started asking me to send money to help with daily expenses, I had to refuse. I know they're retired and don't have the same income they used to. And since Declan doesn't contribute anything, it's clear they aren't going to get very far with their savings. But I can't send them money every month to help while my brother lives like he doesn't have a care in the world. Besides, there have been other situations I'll talk about later that make it difficult for me to give them money. Now, my wife knows my whole family history. She can't stand my brother, and it's not just because he's a deadbeat son to my parents, but also because he has made her feel very uncomfortable on several occasions. You see, Declan constantly flirts with my wife. From the day he met her, he has always acted overly affectionate towards her. He tries to be close to her and even makes suggestive comments that are completely inappropriate. He does it under the excuse of being playful or friendly, and if I call him out on it, he plays it down, laughs, and acts like it's a joke. What makes all this even worse is how my parents respond to these situations, which is the situation I mentioned before. They don't see it for what it really is. Instead of putting Declan in his place or supporting me, they completely dismiss it. They say it's just an innocent crush, like some silly kid thing. Sometimes they even make little comments that sound like they're subtly encouraging him. For example, when my wife first met my parents, we were all sitting together chatting. Suddenly, my mom said to my wife, who was just my girlfriend at the time, something like, "You were really funny. You know? You'd actually make a much better match for my other son, Declan. You two have the same kind of humor." Then my dad chimed in, agreeing with her. He told my wife something like, "Yeah, Declan is really funny. Someone like him would probably be more fun for you." Since my wife and I were so surprised by their comments at first, we thought maybe they were just joking and tried to laugh it off. But over the years, my parents have kept bringing up the idea that my wife would have been a better match for my brother. It's like a recurring theme they have never let go of. Again and again, they've said things like she's so much more like Declan, or commented on how my wife and Declan have such similar personalities, as if that meant she ended up with the wrong son. Even on our wedding day, right before the ceremony, my mom pulled my wife aside and asked her, "Are you sure you want to marry him?" She said it like she was giving my wife one last chance to back out, like she was hoping my wife would change her mind and leave. Can you imagine how crushing it was to hear that on our wedding day? I had a big fight with my parents about it and cut them out of my life back then, but over time they apologized, promising they would never talk that way to my wife again. However, at my brother's next birthday, they went out of their way to get my wife to stand next to him for photos or videos. My wife simply said no, and we ended up leaving early before they cut the cake. We understood our parents weren't going to change and that this was something they would continue. After that, my mom tried to justify it by saying, "My brother has never had a girlfriend, so he's just got a crush on my wife because she's so pretty and he likes being around her, that maybe being around her more will help him set a goal to become better and get someone like her for himself." My dad isn't much better. He said things like, "What's the harm in standing next to him for a picture if it makes your brother happy?" We stopped attending family events that involved my brother. No birthdays, no gatherings, nothing. We've completely distanced ourselves. I stopped visiting my parents completely, and my wife did too. However, my mother insists we attend this time because she has invited all my cousins and extended family and doesn't want me to miss out because people might start asking questions. But I already know what's going to happen because my brother will be there, and neither of us wants to go, especially my wife. While it bothers me, I wouldn't have married her if I thought she might leave me for that loser. It's just the disrespect towards me, but my wife feels uncomfortable, so we're prioritizing her decision. I wouldn't mind seeing distant relatives I haven't seen in a while, but none of that is worth it. I'm not making this post to ask if I should go or not, but to tell about my family and get this off my chest, as the invitation has made me think a lot about my life as a child. Update 1. First, thanks to the people who commented on my post. With so many posts out there, I thought no one would read it. My wife said something to me after thinking about my parents' invitation, which has also made me think. She says that if we don't go, my parents will surely have to invent an excuse for why I'm not at their anniversary, and it will be something that won't make me look good. She thinks we should go, and if my brother gets out of line, it would be the perfect opportunity to put them in their place right in front of everyone. There would be no excuses for them to tell relatives or friends a different story later. I'm not saying it's a bad plan for my wife, but I'm thinking about it because it could also go horribly wrong. Update 2. Well, we decided to go to my parents' wedding anniversary, and honestly, I think the outcome is pretty positive. During the event, my parents were clearly excited to see me. My mom gave me a big hug and said she honestly didn't think I'd come and was so happy I did. I just nodded and smiled. Everything was going relatively well until dinner. We were all sitting around the table, catching up, making small talk. Then one of my aunts casually mentioned that all the cousins were already married or in relationships, except my brother Declan. She laughed a little and asked him half-jokingly why he was still single, and if maybe he was dating someone he wanted to marry soon. My brother just smiled awkwardly and blushed like he was trying to hide something. Then, one of the cousins playfully shouted, "Come on, Declan, spill it. Do you have someone hidden away somewhere?" That's when my mom, without missing a beat, said loudly, "Oh, I don't know if he has a girlfriend, but he's got a big crush on his brother's wife." Then she pointed to my wife and laughed like a 5-year-old kid with a crush on his teacher. My dad joined in the laughter, laughing even harder. I glared at my mother from where I was, but she didn't even notice. She was too busy laughing and talking to my aunt, saying something about how my brother had a crush on my wife for so many years. Then, as if that wasn't enough, my aunt turned towards my wife and asked her loudly and thoughtlessly, "Do you have any sisters or cousins Declan could date?" Maybe? Some of the relatives actually laughed when they heard this. My brother just stood there blushing, smiling slightly. He didn't try to stop my parents. He didn't try to change the subject. He just stood there enjoying the attention like it was a compliment. I felt the heat rising in my face, but I calmed myself down because we had prepared for this. I was going to say something, but I was going to say it loud enough for everyone to hear. I wasn't going to wait to get a text from a slightly deaf cousin the next day, asking us why I humiliated my parents. I turned towards my mother and said, "How dare you talk about my wife like this?" The whole table went silent and started listening. I told them, "You promised me, both of you, that you wouldn't cross this line again. You swore you would respect our boundaries and stop putting us in awkward situations. But here we are again. You're laughing about my brother having a crush on my wife. You find it funny? Because you're just as idiotic as he is." Then I addressed the rest of the table, my cousins, aunts, and uncles, and said, "Let me ask you a question. How many of you think it's okay for someone to openly say they have a crush on their own sibling's partner and for the whole family to laugh about it like it's a comedy scene? Do you really think this is normal?" Suddenly, no one had an answer. Then I turned towards my brother and I just let it all out. "You've been acting like a pervert towards my wife for years. You flirt with her every time we're around. You've sent her text messages late at night even though she's never replied and has blocked you. You try to stand too close to her, you touch her when she's clearly uncomfortable, and you act like it's all a joke." My brother's face fell immediately. I looked around the table and continued, "And you all think this is funny? You really think it's okay for someone to act like this towards their brother's wife?" I turned to my parents and said, "And you two, how many times have you made comments about how my wife and Declan would make a great couple? You've been doing this for years. You even said things like that on our wedding day. Do you realize how sick that is, how incredibly disrespectful it is, not just to me, but to my wife?" Everyone was completely silent. I was so mad at my aunt, too, for going along with my mother's joke. So I looked her directly in the eye and asked, "Would you ever say these kinds of things about your own son's partner? Would you tell your daughter-in-law she'd be a better match for someone else in the family? Would you let your son act like this towards someone else's wife?" She looked surprised and then slowly shook her head. "Exactly. That's what I damn well thought. So why is it okay when my parents do it to me?" My dad looked like he was about to explode. His face was red, his fists clenched on the table, but I told him, "Don't you dare say much. Don't even try. I think Mom and your brother seem to have excellent chemistry. Maybe they should be together too. Nothing, just a thought, always in jest, right?" Of course he was furious after that. My mother, on the other hand, started to panic. She tried to laugh it off with a shaky voice, saying, "I didn't mean anything by it. Come on, it's not a big deal. It's just an innocent crush. We've always joked like that about your wife and Declan. I'm sorry, but it really is funny, and I wasn't trying to offend anyone. That's when my wife, who had also practiced her part, spoke to my mother. Oh, I get it. Since everything is a joke to you, I guess cheating on your husband years ago was just fun too, right? I think it's time for all of us to have a laugh. Come on, start laughing. All while gesturing for them to laugh. My mother froze with wide eyes. My wife continued, I guess you also had an innocent crush on the neighbor, right? And I guess when you decided to sleep with him, it didn't mean anything. It was just for fun, wasn't it? What my wife had said was completely true. This was an ugly little secret they had kept for years and kept secret from everyone. A long time ago, my mother had cheated on my father with the neighbor, and when he found out, she begged him not to leave. He only stayed for me and my brother. Over time, he seemed to have forgiven her or at least moved past it. But my wife knows this truth because I told her. She's kept it a secret for many years. But before coming to dinner, she asked me if it was okay for her to use all this to defend herself. And my answer was, you have free reign to use all the ammo you want. My mother came out of her shock and immediately started yelling at my wife. She wasn't in joke mode anymore. She yelled that my wife had no right to throw that in her face and that she had crossed a line. My dad also defended my mother, calling my wife disrespectful and incredibly low. But I was also going to defend my wife, and I told them, you crossed the line the moment you turned my wife into the punchline of your weird jokes, the moment you kept defending Declan like he was a harmless child, when he has been making my wife uncomfortable for years. It's pretty creepy that a big guy like Declan has a crush on his sister-in-law. He's not a kid. He's a damn grown, semi-functional adult who should become completely functional with a wake-up call. I don't know, maybe a kick in the pants to send him out on his own. My mother started crying in front of everyone to see if she could gain some sympathy points, trying to turn the situation around as if she were the victim now, because here was the horrible son, meaning me, yelling at her and telling her a few truths. But people kept thinking about what she had said, added to the fact that my mother had cheated on my dad. Finally, Declan opened his mouth just to yell at me for ruining the party. You always have to make everything about you, I told him. None of this would be about me or my wife if you hadn't done it from the start. You sat there like a seal, waiting for its fish, while you let Mom announce your crush on my wife like it was a joke. You didn't say a word to stop it. You blushed like a schoolgirl watching the quarterback walk through the halls. All that was missing was you twirling your hair with your fingers. Are you mad at me? Well, damn right, because your anger matters less than nothing to me. He said, oh, please. You always act like the victim. Nobody said anything that bad. While my parents and Declan kept yelling and blaming each other, my wife and I decided to leave. The yelling didn't seem like it was going to stop anytime soon, and we had already done our job. What was the point of staying there any longer? My parents and brother were going to keep sticking to their version, while everyone else had heard everything there was to hear. I just quieted them down a bit to tell them, it's over. Don't you dare contact us, unless you grow up and are ready to take responsibility. If that doesn't happen, then don't call us when one of you dies either, and that was that. Family members started sending mostly supportive messages. Even my aunt apologized for not saying anything when my mother started talking about my wife. In the end, it turned out better than I expected, so I have to admit my wife was right. It's good to have ripped the Band-Aid off all at once. Update 3. Everything has been disturbingly quiet. I don't know, I expected more calls from my parents. There were only a couple that went to voicemail, but as far as I know, they're so humiliated they don't want to say anything to make it worse. I've listened to their messages and they're pretty calm compared to how we left the house the other day. I get it. They're afraid we'll explode again and tell them more truths. But I think we've said everything. We haven't held anything back. Sure, we had other ways of saying what we said, but in the moment, it just came out that way. For example, my wife planned to say my brother was a loser. She would never even consider dating, but in the heat of the moment, she forgot and only remembered the important thing. Talking about my mother's infidelity. Looking back on the dinner, I think it was positive. We had to stop at a fast food restaurant after leaving there because we barely ate anything during the night, but we had a good time talking about it over some burgers and fries. Update 4. Almost 3 months have passed since my last update, with several things worth mentioning now. First of all, despite cutting off all contact with my brother and warning him multiple times, Declan has sent creepy and unsolicited love letters to my wife. Even after our threats to involve the police, he didn't seem to care. We had to take further action later. Then, about a month ago, my wife and I received incredible news. We're expecting a baby. We were filled with joy and shared the happy news on social media. This was clearly a big mistake because earlier this week, things took a terrifying turn. My wife got home from work and was surprised to find Declan sitting on our porch waiting for her. He started to get up as soon as she saw him. She immediately felt unsafe, so she ran to her car and started driving away while he ran towards the car and begged her to stay and talk to him. I can't even begin to describe the panic she must have felt in that moment. She called me and I rushed home as fast as I could. We both called the police right away, and since we already had reports against him for the creepy letters, it wasn't hard to get him locked up for a few days. All until he was released by my parents on bail, but he still has to face trial. Our lawyer had also filed for a restraining order against him, but it hadn't been approved at the time he showed up at our house. We've also talked to our lawyer, and while we can press charges against him, as well as testify in court, we wondered how much a criminal trial against my brother might cost. He told us that if my parents pay for a lawyer, it could cost between $10,000 and $20,000 to defend him, but it could be much more if they choose an expensive lawyer. That gives us some peace of mind, because even if Declan doesn't get any sentence, my parents will have to pay a lot of money to ensure that. It sounds vengeful, but if Declan after the party is still in romantic emo mode and still doesn't take no for an answer, and my parents don't do anything, then it will be justice or the cost of it that takes care of things. Now, these things take time, but I promise to come back with news on everything when that happens. Update 5. So much time has passed that we're already parents, but I said I'd come back, and here I am with much more than I thought I'd have to write. During all this time, we weren't scared answering some people's questions because shortly after getting the restraining order, which was granted shortly after the previous incident for obvious reasons, Declan tried to approach my wife again and broke bail. My parents lost their money because of that. That's the first thing. The second thing was that Declan also lost his trial. And although I don't know how much money my parents lost, I know he didn't have a public defender and they had to pay, which didn't do much good because Declan ended up serving a 6-month sentence between pre-trial time and post-trial time, plus mandatory court-ordered therapy for as long as necessary. Third, my parents have gotten divorced. You know when male puppies, I don't know if this happens with other animals, have undescended testicles and then they drop. It's like a milestone where they enter adulthood because they start having desires for female dogs and become territorial. Well, my father's testicles have dropped, which is quite a scientific milestone at his age, and he has decided to divorce my mother. Apparently, the distress of everyone knowing he was cheated on was too much. My mother has gotten custody of Declan, not in the traditional sense, since he's not a minor, but she's taken him to live with her. They've both gone back to work because between the expenses with Declan and the divorce, neither of them could live on savings alone. Imagine having listened to the people who said I had already done enough with the dinner and that not dropping the charges against Declan was too vengeful on my part. I don't feel the same way. Fourth, the family has been sidelining them. They've shown it by not lending money during the trial or unfriending, blocking them on social media. Fifth, social media has also been important in this because it hasn't been us. But let's just say the town knows who my parents are now and who Declan is. That's why they've had a very hard time being able to rent something after losing their house between the trial and the divorce. My father has moved out of state while my mother has only moved a few towns farther away since the court has ordered that Declan cannot leave the state. And sixth, nothing much, just that life is much happier. Declan might seem like a danger because he's still close by, but we have a restraining order and he has a record. Not even he is stupid enough to try to spend more time in prison. Seventh, it's time for more thanks and hellos while I'm still enjoying being a dad.